January 6, 1937 was the first working day for the 75th Congress of the United States. On that day, the Congress passed an act forbidding any further shipment of American arms to the Republic of Spain. The democratic government of Spain was then under attack by a rebellious general named Francisco Franco, who was supported by Europe's two most feared dictators, Hitler and Mussolini. The arms embargo was an act which was to have momentous and disastrous consequences for America and the rest of the world. 406 members of the United States House of Representatives voted in support of the embargo. Only one individual in Congress raised his voice in protest.
It is my opinion, after these many years, it is my opinion that if the majority of Congress had had the understanding and the courage of John Bernard, and if the President of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, had had the courage and the understanding of John Bernard, we might have prevented World War II and saved millions and millions of lives. And I am absolutely sure that we would have saved democratic Spain.
As I think about John Bernard now, I have to think in terms of the times. I have to think in terms of Farmer-Labor people, the Farmer-Labor Party, and I have to think in terms of the people of the northern part of Minnesota. I don't think you could take John Bernard and separate him from all those factors.
John Toussaint Bernard was born on the impoverished French island of Corsica on the 6th of March, 1893. He was the youngest child in a poor family. In 1900, his father came to the United States and settled on the Iron Range of northern Minnesota, where mine owners were employing thousands of foreign-born laborers to dig the raw metal from the earth. John Bernard's father found a home in the tiny town of Eveleth, Minnesota, and began working as an iron miner. Then as now, Eveleth was a town dominated, almost surrounded by iron mines. In 1907, John and his brothers joined their parents in Eveleth. Like other immigrant children, Bernard was handicapped in school by poor English, and soon he followed his father, uncle, and brother into the mines. As an iron miner, Bernard shared the life experiences of the Finns, the Italians, the Slavs, and the Poles. He was employed at the spruce mine in Eveleth, owned by the Oliver Iron Mining Company, a subsidiary of the giant United States Steel Corporation.
In those days, the wages were mighty low. The miners were getting $2.10 a day for 10 hours labor, for 10 hours work. And working with these miners and remembering that in France they had unions. Remember and knowing that in most European countries they had unions. So I would say to these miners, why don't we have a union here? But they had stool pigeons in the mines. That's how I was blacklisted. I was sent home.
But before attacking Bernard directly, the steel company put pressure on his family to discourage him from organizing. First they fired his father, then his uncle. John remembers that day.
My mother looking at me, I could feel her eyes on me. Finally she said, John, are you going to take care of your uncle and his family? Are you going to feed them? What could I answer? I didn't say a word. Finally she said, why don't you say something? I said, Mother, I didn't sleep last night. I decided to leave town. She started to cry. We don't want you to leave home. Stay here, whatever there is to eat with the body, you know that. But why don't you let someone else do that? should it be you all the time? I said, that's not me only. There are others who are trying to do the same thing. I said, Mother, don't ask me to bother this dear trust. I can't do it. When they reach down to that level in the gutter, don't ask me to bother. I can't do it. You didn't make me that way. If it was possible to kill a person more than once, I would rather be put against that wall and killed a dozen times. Don't ask me to bother them. I will not do it. I cannot do it.
After he was blacklisted, Bernard served with the United States Army in France during World War I. 2 years later, he returned to Eveleth and found a job with the local fire department.
I'll show you where my room was for a long, long time. This was my room here. Look what it is now. My room. I spent so many years of my life there. Look at it.
While at the fire hall, Bernard became active in the local Farmer-Labor Party, which angered his supervisors.
They wanted me to stop being at the head of the Farmer-Labor Party here. But I said, but just because I have a little job here, I'm to lose my rights as a citizen. You want to be Republicans or Democrats, it's your business. I want to be a Farmer-Laborite.
We are operating under an economic system, call it capitalism, call it anything. And it is as certain that it is failing to function as it is certain that the sun will shine again.
Led by Governor Floyd B. Olson, the Farmer-Labor Party came to power in Minnesota in the 1930s, offering radical answers to the misery of the Great Depression.
And so we are working with this system to the inevitable end that there shall be a wealthy class and a poor class. That's inevitable under the system. Wealth is concentrating more and more into the hands of a few.
As a substitute for capitalism, the Farmer-Labor Party proposed the Cooperative Commonwealth, a system of state-owned, large-scale industry, producer and consumer co-ops, and small private businesses and farms.
And I say, this movement has never tolerated nor permitted the use of armed force for the purpose of breaking a strike.
Tremendously popular among his fellow workers, the multilingual fireman from Eveleth quickly gained the attention of Farmer-Labor Party leaders. In 1936, he was persuaded by Governor Olson to run for Congress. John's older brother, Angie, also encouraged him to run.
Well, I thought it was a great thing for him because he had the ability, he had a love for mankind and everything, love for his fellow man. Well, he'd be the right man because I know that they couldn't buy him. Thank you. They could not deter him from doing his duty.
But as an immigrant and a laborer, Bernard faced an uphill battle.
People were scoffing. They said, well, he's a foreigner. How can you have him as a congressman? And I pointed out when they talked, mentioned that he had an accent. I said, indeed. I said, yes, but it was an accent of the tongue. It was not an accent of the mind or the heart. And that he would make an excellent congressman because he was an intelligent man.
A month before the 1936 elections, the Democratic Party pulled out of all Minnesota state races in return for Farmer-Labor support of President Roosevelt's re-election bid.
Back again, back again, back again, back again. We've got Franklin D. Roosevelt back again. We'll have money in our jeans, we can travel with the Queen. We've got Franklin D. Roosevelt back again.
On election day, a great wave of voter support for Roosevelt's recovery measures swept him back into the White House. In Minnesota, the progressive sentiment produced a landslide farmer-labor victory over the Republicans. Elmer Benson was elected governor on the farmer-labor ticket, and Bernard easily won his race for Congress. And so the little Corsican fireman from Eveleth left his wife Josephine and daughter Marie for a boarding house in Washington. But at the same time, the sound of explosions and the smell of gunpowder echoed and drifted across the Spanish peninsula on the far side of the Atlantic. The political turmoil of Spain had erupted into civil war. In 1936, the Spanish people democratically elected a new government. This moderately socialist government advocated reforms which would reduce the economic and political power of the Catholic Church. Its program of land reform angered Spain's wealthy aristocracy. The church hierarchy and the landed elite found support in the Spanish army. The army, led by General Francisco Franco, sought to destroy the popularly elected government by force. Franco described his campaign as a crusade to save the Catholic Church from communism. His anti-communism gained him the military support of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. Already the two fascist dictators were making plans to conquer the world, and Spain provided a testing ground for their military capacities. Thousands of German and Italian planes, ships, and soldiers poured into Spain to assist Franco. In their path stood only a hastily assembled popular militia and a democratic government looking desperately for support to the democracies of the world. In the United States, progressives viewed the attack on the Spanish Republic as the beginning of a worldwide fascist assault against democracy. Roger Hargrave was a student in college when he and 3,000 other Americans volunteered to fight fascism in Spain as part of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade.
We went to Spain to fight fascism, to stop fascism. If we could, if we could, or even slow it down, we might avert World War II. And I guess you could say indirectly we were defending our own country. That was the way we looked at it.
Now listen here, folks, and it ain't no joke. We gotta do something or we're all gonna croak. We can't get a job, we've all been robbed. We got no money and the corn's all cob. We've nothing but blues, the breadline blues.
But the United States was still in the grip of the Great Depression, and most Americans were opposed to any involvement in foreign conflicts that might lead to war. It was this overwhelming isolationist sentiment that encouraged President Roosevelt to propose a ban on the shipment of military supplies to either side in any armed conflict. This arms embargo would sorely damage the ability of the ill-equipped Spanish loyalists to defend themselves against the overwhelming power of Franco, Hitler, and Mussolini. The arms embargo proposal would be the first consideration on John Bernard's first day in Congress. On the morning of the embargo vote, a Spanish freighter, the Mar Cantabrico, was rapidly loading American weapons for delivery to the loyalist militia. Minnesota farmer-laborites and representatives from the Progressive Party of Wisconsin were troubled by the thought that the arms embargo would mean a fascist victory in Spain.
We discussed it for about an hour and a half. Then we took an unofficial vote, a straw vote as we may call. And 7 out of the 10 men there agreed that such a resolution would be unfriendly, undemocratic, un-American, pro-fascist. Well, I said to myself, John, you're not alone. But then Boylo of Wisconsin, a progressive from Wisconsin, whom we had picked as our floor leader because he had been in Congress 4 terms already, and he was an attorney. Said, but who's going to vote against this resolution? I said, hell, there's 7 of us. Oh, no, he said. A vote against that resolution would mean political suicide. The Republicans want it. The Democrats want it. President Roosevelt wants it. Cordell Hull, our Secretary of State, wants it.
In New York Harbor, the Mar Cantabrico set sail hoping to reach the 3-mile limit and the freedom of the open seas before the embargo was made law. A Coast Guard cutter followed on its heels, ready to stop it if the embargo resolution passed. Speaker of the House, William Bankhead, asked for the adoption of the embargo by unanimous consent.
So I jumped up, Mr. Speaker, I object. I was tense, nervous, I shouted, and I could shout a little louder than I can now. Bankhead looked at me with murder in his eyes. The Speaker refused to recognize me, and I shouted, Mr. Speaker, I object. I objected 4 times. Boileau, whom we had chosen as our leader, was sitting directly behind me. The Speaker could not see Boyle without seeing me, but he said to Boyle, why does a gentleman from Wisconsin arise? Boyle said, Mr. Speaker, my colleague from Minnesota was on his feet trying to get your attention. He wants to object to the unanimous passage of this resolution. And in fairness to him, I think you should reconsider your decision. That's when Speaker Bankhead recognized me. Does the gentleman from Minnesota mean to tell me that he was on his feet, objecting to the passage of this resolution? I said, Mr. Speaker, I objected 4 times. Then he said in a very quiet, sugared voice, does the gentleman from Minnesota object to the passage of this resolution? And then I held my voice down. I said, Mr. Speaker, I object. I felt like using some of the language which I had learned in the mines of northern Minnesota. I really felt like saying, you old bastard, if you can't hear, what right have you to sit in that seat?
Bernard's objection provided time for the Mar Cantabrico to pass the 3-mile limit. The embargo resolution then came up for a final vote. Warning that failure to stop fascism in Spain would force America into a wider war later, Bernard alone voted no.
John Rankin of Mississippi jumped to his feet. He said, Mr. Speaker, I demand a roll call. I want to see if there is a single member of this body who has a nerve to vote against such an American patriotic resolution. I looked at this fellow, I didn't know who in hell he was. I said to myself, you bastard, I'll show you want to vote against this resolution.
The arms on the Mar Cantabrico were the last to leave America bound for the defenders of the Spanish Republic.
When they smile and say, no raise in pay.
Sit down!
Sit down! When you want the boss to come across. Sit down! Sit down!
Sit down, just take a seat. Sit down and rest your feet. Sit down, you've got 'em beat. Sit down, sit down.
When the speed up comes, just twiddle your thumb.
Sit down! Sit down!
When you want them to know, they better go slow.
Sit down!
Sit down!
Sit down, just take a seat. Sit down and rest your feet. Sit down, you've got 'em beat. Sit down, sit down.
At the same time as the embargo vote, thousands of auto workers in Flint, Michigan, occupied the factories of General Motors in a giant sit-down strike. Halting all production and living in the auto plants, the workers demanded that GM recognize their union. Bob Travis, leader of the Flint strike, remembers.
Sit down.
I invited a number of people in Washington to come to Flint to see what was going on, and John was one of them. John was the only man that came out of the whole list of so-called liberals that would help, came or sent messages.
When Bernard arrived, he climbed through a plant window and sat down with the strikers. He was the only member of Congress to openly support the sit-downers on the floor of the House. After 44 days of sitting in and a series of attacks by Flint police, the strikers won their battle with General Motors. It was a conflict that has been called the most significant labor struggle in American history. The sit-down at Flint was part of a massive upsurge of labor organizing led by John L. Lewis's Committee on Industrial Organization. The CIO attempted to organize the workers in the mass production industries which the American Federation of Labor had ignored. Bernard believed in the CIO's labor militancy and even served as a CIO organizer while still in Congress. That same year, timber workers in Minnesota and northern Michigan went on strike for better working conditions. In Minnesota, the timber workers gained the sympathetic ear of Bernard and Farmer-Labor Governor Elmer Benson. The Farmer-Labor Party aided the loggers in their strike.
Well, we fed them for one thing. We fed them in the armory at Duluth. We fed them with turkey and grapefruit and all the other things that people like to eat.
How did Weyerhaeuser feel toward you?
I never saw Weyerhaeusers, and I never had anything to do with them. It was my policy and to avoid those people. I never had anything to do with them. I never had anything to do with any of them, have any big business interests. Never saw them. Wasn't concerned about them.
On the northern peninsula of Michigan, the clash was more intense and violent. Groups of pro-company vigilantes threatened the lives of the Michigan labor militants, including strike leader Matt Savola.
And John came to Ironwood, Michigan, which was the general strike headquarters, and he wanted to do something for the strikers. We met John at the St. James Hotel, and we went to John's room, and I had a coat on. I took the coat off and laid it on the bed in John's hotel room, and when I laid it there, a .38 caliber revolver just slipped out of the pocket of the coat. So John happened to notice that, and he said, "Aha, I see you have your credentials."
That's right.
In 1937, as now, it was unusual for a United States congressman to take such an active role in support of labor.
Unusual, I agree with you. But honestly, I believe that's what should have been done by all these legislators who are sent to Washington. The bulk of the voters sending them to Washington are common folks like we are. But when they get down there, most of them want to keep that job. It's a good job because they get their salary and then rake up from the corporations. It's a damn good paying job for crooks especially.
John Bernard quickly won national attention as a U.S. congressman. The Saturday Evening Post reported that Bernard was an accomplished baritone singer who had almost joined the New York Metropolitan Opera on his return from World War I. Dozens of national speaking engagements gained him a wide reputation for oratorical powers. Bernard was an enthusiastic supporter of such New Deal legislation as minimum wage laws, low-rent public housing, rural electrification, and farm aid. But like other farmer-laborites, he believed the New Deal was moving too slowly toward its egalitarian reforms. The 1930s were also marked by ugly race hatred. In the southern states, the Ku Klux Klan terrorized black people, engaging in beatings and lynchings, murders that were unpunished by local officials. When a national anti-lynching law was introduced in Congress in 1937, John Bernard became one of its most vocal supporters.
And the Ku Klux Klan naturally knew it, including the Ku Klux Klan that they had already here in the city of Virginia. And And one day they paraded through the main thoroughfare of Evelyn, through the main street of Evelyn, with their masks, their regalia. Bill Eddy, I believe, was the leader of the Klan, whatever they call it, in Virginia. After the session of Congress, when congressmen go home to their districts, Bill Eddy came to me. He said, "Johnny, are you a nigger lover?" I said, "What?" "I asked if you were a nigger lover." I said, "Bill, I'm a lover of the human race. I don't give a damn whether they're black, yellow, what they are."
But with all his activities on the domestic front, John Bernard didn't forget the cause of the Loyalists in Spain. With fellow Congressman Jerry O'Connell of Montana, he traveled to Spain to show his support for the Americans who were fighting Franco.
One day after breakfast, I happened to be walking around there, and I see a group of guys, they were congregating. And I went up there, and who do you think there was there? John T. Bernard. So I went up and we shook hands, and John takes a look at me, and I think he's got a marvelous memory of names and faces, because he says, "You're from Minnesota, aren't you?" I said, "Yep, I'm from Minneapolis."
While in Spain, Bernard and O'Connell visited with reporter Ernest Hemingway, a Loyalist supporter himself.
Hemingway was a correspondent for the New York Times and other newspapers, I guess. That's the only place where we could get something decent to eat. Where he got those beautiful steaks, I have no idea at all. But he was definitely on the side of the Republic. And he treated Jerry and I welcome guests. We were wondering where in heck he said, I get them. He told us about the struggle in Spain. He said, the people of Spain want the Republic. They voted for it almost unanimously. A little better than 7-1 for the Republic. These are good people, simple, and they want our own constitution, copy our own constitution. I cannot understand why our government did this. These people are wonderful. All they want their freedom. They want to be able to run their own government.
The war in Spain was going badly for the anti-Franco forces, who had been cut off from needed military supplies by the arms embargo. But the Americans fighting in Spain appreciated John Bernard's desperate and futile attempts to aid their cause. They named a front-line trench in his honor. Bernard ran for re-election in 1938. But by then, the New Deal had lost most of its popularity, and Bernard's activities had made him as many enemies as friends. His Republican challenger, William Pittenger, accused him of communist leanings. His open support of Loyalist Spain angered American Catholic Church leaders who saw Franco as defending the church against atheistic communism.
Some of the leadership of my own church, not the church, you cannot blame a church for the actions of some of their leaders. They must have received instruction from somewhere. I was attacked bitterly. At the Armory in Duluth, which is perhaps the largest hall at that time that there was, Monsignor John Fulton Sheen came to speak there, and he devoted 20 minutes castigating me. And the Sunday before the election, I was attacked from the pulpit at High Mass, even my own priest.
The American Federation of Labor was upset by Bernard's support of its militant rival, the CIO, and some farmer-laborites felt Bernard was advocating too radical a program for the public to accept.
You didn't always agree with John Bernard.
No, I didn't. Not by a long shot. But I agreed with his record, I can tell you that he made. The only thing I was interested in was trying to help in the campaign to keep him in office rather than to hinder him from campaigning and doing what he was doing. I felt that we just couldn't approach this as fast as he was approaching, which I assume I was correct, because he goes beat.
The 1938 elections were a disaster for the Farmer-Labor Party and the progressives all over the country. After his defeat, Bernard returned to the Iron Range to look for work as a common laborer. But prospective employers had been frightened by his militant union activities. John Bernard was blacklisted.
Well, I went first to the head of the Steel Trust here, a hell of a good guy. Kaiser was his name. I said, Bill, I've got to work, you know. He looked at me and said, John, I knew him. You know everybody. He attended the same church where I was singing in the choir, so I was not a stranger to him. He said, I wish I could put you to work. But believe me, I can't. And I didn't ask him any more questions. I understood.
Everywhere Bernard went to look for work, the story was the same. Congressman Thomas Aimlee, a Wisconsin progressive, and many other former colleagues wrote Bernard expressing their dismay over his misfortune. Early in 1939, Democratic Spain fell to Franco. As Bernard had warned Congress, Hitler was emboldened by his military success in Spain. The Nazi blitzkrieg spread through Europe. World War II had begun. The United States could remain neutral no longer. President Roosevelt told his closest advisors that he had made a great mistake in stopping arms shipments to the Spanish Republic. 9 months after John Bernard left office, Roosevelt asked Congress to repeal the arms embargo. Bernard finally found a job in Chicago as Political Action Director for the United Electrical Workers Union. In the late 40s, he campaigned vigorously against the Taft-Hartley Act, a bill which sharply limited the rights of organized labor. His union work led to a subpoena from the House Un-American Activities Committee.
Their attorney questioned, he threw question after question at me. He took a photostatic copy of what the statement in the Who's Who in America about me they have about many, many people there. He said, did you ever read this? Yes, I read it many times. I said, read it. You read it, I said. You're getting paid for this. And my attorney was afraid that I'll be cited for contempt of Congress. Would pull my coat. John, you better... I will not read it. If these bastards ask me to jig for them, I'll have to jig. I will not do it. He was worried. And then they took a copy of a telegram that I had sent down Washington against the Taft-Hartley Act, which was perhaps the most anti-labor act, bill that had ever been put in Congress. The chairman said, do you admit that you signed your name to this bill against the Taft-Hitler Act? He made a slip of the tongue, naturally. Yeah, I said, yeah. When he said the Taft-Hitler Act, I said, the truth is bound to come to the surface. So he said, you see, you try to help us to get at the truth. I said, you counsel. Just mention the Taft-Hitler Act, I consider that to be the truth. That's exactly how I felt about it.
For the past 50 years, Finnish immigrants and their descendants have come to this cooperatively owned park near Hibbing, Minnesota, to celebrate Johannes-Koko, the Midsummer Festival. Today, the tradition continues, even though not all who come to the festival are Finnish. And in 1977, the participants honored an immigrant of another nationality, a Corsican named John Bernard.
Get back to the old country.
This is
country.
You can breathe, not be afraid to fill your lungs with air here.
That's right.
I saw you once before, I think. I saw your picture on television. You look a whole lot better in person than you do on television. I don't know what you do.
Oh, thank you.
Hello, John. Barak Kasim. Last time I see you. 37. 1937. Barak Kasim, the hospital.
Oh, the hospital in Spain.
Yeah.
God damn.
Out of Mediterranean.
No. Oh, by God.
I haven't seen you for about 5 years.
Well, I mean, look, close to Los Angeles, Long Beach.
Yeah.
A lot of elderly people there.
Oh, yeah.
And the government is not doing what they should do for them or for all the people in the country, as a matter of fact.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if they would get these big corporations to pay the just taxes, they would plenty of money to put the people to work.
Well, it could be done.
It could be done. It's up to we the people to do it, to see that they do it.
People have to wake up and do something
we
like
have
that. We did it in the yesteryear.
That's right, we did in the 30s, didn't we?
Yeah.
We are in our numbers going to the millions. Those bastards are only a small handful, and we allow them to pull us by the nose. It's about time we wake up.
Wake up. All
we got to.
Bernard still returns to Minnesota occasionally from his home in California to visit his brother and friends. But the tribute at the Midsummer Festival was something special to him. Although 40 years had passed since his loan embargo vote, over 500 people came to see him, to hear him, and to tell him his courage would not be forgotten.
This is indeed a joyous occasion with so many of John's old friends and new friends gathered together to honor him. I would say also that it may be a time for reminiscing, perhaps from the 1930s when some of us were especially active in the political movement. It was an exciting time, it was a challenging time, and those of us who were farmer laborites had a common dream, the cooperative commonwealth. The opportunity to have worked with so many of you dedicated, fine men and women within the farmer labor movement and throughout the years has given my life meaning and momentum. At the present time, we see emerging a new promising generation of young people. They are eager to continue the building of a better world, a world of peace and justice and freedom. And to these young people, I envision Johnny Bernard and Elmer Benson, the Susie Stagelbergs, the Marion Lesueurs, and all of us extending to them a most gracious, warm welcome. Thank you.
One seat. Okay.
And dear friends, you all. Personally, I feel, and I have felt for quite some time, that all members of the human race are my brothers and sisters. You particularly went through many fights, which I'm sure we all enjoyed. Proud of what we tried to do, and determined to try in our humble way to add a little bit more. Because the time is running short. In my opinion, I have felt this so seriously. I'm pushing 85 now. I'm getting a little impatient. I have dreamt for so many years for the victory, the ultimate victory of we, the people. And before I leave this earth, call it being selfish, call it whatever you want, I would like to see many more startling victories of the people.
John Bernard's life and work have always been tied to the experiences and dreams of common people. He still works actively for the things he believes in. He always was and still is a poor man materially, but he feels with good reason that his has been a wealthy life.
Well, here's a little song, and I know that my voice might crack, but kindly understand and forgive me. We'll make America land all can love. Organize her, unionize her, make the bright star of right shine above. Make the railroads and the factories and the farmlands all our own. We'll make America our own sweet home. We'll make America our own sweet home. Thank you. Thank you.